Okay. Okay. So going back a little bit, the Gemara said, "Meise tumtum shekidesh kedusha pasuk." A tumtum that mixed the ashes and the water together to prepare the afer for the paraduma is pasuk with neishu suffik oro v'oro pasuk lakadosh. And an oro is not kosher to make the meipara. And the Gemara used this as a raya to say that an oral cannot do hazah either, because that was the discussion that we had earlier. But the point of the Gemara that we're focusing on now is the androgynous shekidesh kedusha kosher, and androgynous who does it, it's kosher, provided that his male section is gemalit, because even on the tzad that the androgynous is a woman is also kosher to prepare the ashes and the water of the paraduma. So we have over here a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama whether a woman is allowed to, whether she's kosher to mix the ashes and the water of the paradum. Okay, so the Gemara wants to know my time with the Rabban. What is the svara of the Rabban? Zok the Gemara. The Ksiva says in the pasuk. So let's just quickly review the psukim because that will help us understand what's going on over here. Just by midweek test, it's Pashas Chukas, we know. Let's see if I can find it over here in this Chumash. The midbar test. Oh, Chukas. Okay, so it says over here. So as we're preparing the the offer of paraduma, it says over here, it says v'lakhu latame, they should take v'lakhu, they should take for the tame me'afar shreifas achatos from the afar. V'lakhu is a lashon rabbim, they shall take. V'nosan olav, and he should pour on it mayim chayim el keli. So that's the first thing I want to point out, that it says v'lakhu lashon rabbim, and then v'nosan olav lashon yachid. That's the first thing we have to know. Second thing we have to know is further up, how do you get these ashes? Because they burned the paraduma, and the pasuk Yud says v'chibes ha'oisef as efer ha'par as begadim. No, that's not what I'm looking for. Look at v'asaf. The pasuk with v'asaf ish tahar. V'asaf, and he shall gather, ish, a man, tar, a tar, as efer apar. So one person gathered the ashes, and then they took it. There was a v'asaf, ish tar, as efer apar. There was a v'lakhu latame, and there was a v'nosan olav mayim chayim elkel. So it's these three words that the Gemara is going to be focusing on. So zok the Gemara. The Chsiva says in the pasuk, v'lakhu latame, plural. They should take for the tame me'afar sreifas hachatos. So we learned from here, Hanach the Pasli Basifa Psulum Bekidish. V'lakhu, who should take? The same people who we were speaking about before, who are going to be the Asaf Ishtar, those same people who make the Asifa are the people we're referring to here that will take the ashes and mix it together with the water. Psulum Bekidish, and Hanach the Ksherin Basifa, Ksherin Bekidish. That's what the Tanakama holds. So who's Mutter Basifa? So let's see what Rashi says. The lakhulatamic basar asifas afroxid. After it says v'asav ishtar, then a couple of people later, as we saw, it says v'lakhu. Ksiv hachavoida, the kiddush. The avoida being the kalish means mixing it with the water. Vein avoida mafsekes time. There's no avoida in between the asifa and the mixing with the water. So we learned Hanach the Psulim Basifa, Psulim L'Kiddush. The Hatam Darshinam, in Yuma we learned, the Asaf Ish comes to exclude B'loi cotton. So that's one rule, a cotton cannot do the Asifa, cotton cannot be involved in the preparation of the Efer Paraduma. And it says Tar, it says Asaf Ish Tar, Tar L'Achshur Seisha. A woman who's Tar is also able to gather the ashes. Okay, so therefore, the Tanakama says, whoever is mutter v'asifa is mutter b'kiddush, including a woman. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Lach, that cannot be pshat. Because in Cain, if that's how you're going to learn, Nema, let's quickly pick the back. Nema, the high kra, it should say in that pasuk, not v'lakchu, it should say v'lakach. He should take. Who should take? The person who did the asifa earlier, he should take. It doesn't say that. V'lakchu, they shall take. So it's much more that there's more people included. Afilu hanach, the psulim hasam, even those people that might not be able to do the asifa are still going to be kshem hacha to do the mixing. Zok to Gemara, if that's the case, ihachi ishanami. So why wouldn't a woman be allowed? And don't we know that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that a woman can do it? Zok to Gemara, v'nasan v'loy v'nosna. It says v'nasan. It doesn't say v'nosna. So there are those who learn that it's a dik from the lashon of v'nosna. V'nosna is a lashon of female. But Tosfos says if we slip into the bottom Tosfos, that's not male nor female, it's plural. Yeah. It's plural for male or female. It's plural non-binary. Non-binary. V'nasna v'loy v'nasna, k'ra yiseir kadosh. We're darshaning from the extra pasuk. V'loy darish midachasav v'nasna v'loy v'nasna. It's not a dik because it's in male tense, not in female tense. It's not, you never bring a raya from the fact that the Torah uses lashon zachar that this halacha only applies to a man, not a woman. But the whole nashim is extra. So that's how I know a woman cannot do the mixing of the ashes and the water. For Rabbanon, the Rabbanon held a woman can. If it would have said v'lokach and v'nasan, if they would have both been singular tense, then havamina, I would have thought shokel chad v'yoyev chad. One person only can do the asifa, and one person only could do the lakiyah of taking the ashes, and one person only could mix it into the water and put it into the keli. That's what I would have thought. Tosfos says shokel chad v'yoyev chad is even more than that. I would have thought that if we would have said the nasan and v'lokach both in singular tense, we would have thought that it has to be not only one person doing it, but it has to be the same person doing it. Clearly, it's two people doing the lakicha, so one of them for sure isn't doing both. If it would have used a plural lashon for both the lakicha and the nesina, and havamina the shakli tray, the yoiv tray, two people have to pick up the ashes together, and two people have to mix them together. Or maybe according to Tosfos, it would mean the same two people. V'lakai is in plural sense, and nasan is singular tense. To tell us, I feel a shakli tray, v'yoyev chad. It doesn't make a difference. It doesn't make a difference how many people there are in taking the ashes, and it doesn't make a difference how many people are mixing the ashes. But what is constant is according to Rabbi Yehuda, nashim are excluded, and according to Rabbanan, nashim aren't excluded. We just learn that it doesn't matter how many people take the ashes and how many people mix the ashes. So now we have a machlokes whether or not a woman is allowed to do that, and then by extension whether an androgynous that has a bris that he could do. Okay, now we're going to get into a whole new sugya of paradum. The hiza hatar alatami. It says in the pasuk when you're doing the act of the matar someone, it says the hiza hatar alatami. It doesn't have to say the hiza hatar alatami. This is the paraduma. It's like a carbon. Of course, the person that's going to be spritzing it is going to be tahar. So why does it say hiza hatar alatami? Tar mechlal shu tami. Why is it Torah calling him a Torah? There's some level of tumah in him that the Torah is saying, even though he has some level of tumah in him, we'll consider him Tar for the purposes of spritzing the paradum. And who is that person? Limeid al tful yoim shekasher b'pam. It teaches us that a tful yoim is allowed to be involved in the in the spritzing and the making of the paradum. Now, this is a very contentious issue. Why? Tful yoim means that, let's say he touched the sherets, and now he's tamei. So if he goes to the mikveh, he's not tar. He still can't touch truma yet or kachim. He has to wait until tonight. So the Tful Yoim is allowed to be Oishik in the Efer Pardim. The problem is that Tzedaikim held that a Tful Yoim was not allowed to be involved in the process of Paraduma. So because of that, Chazal said, B'davka, we're going to make guys at Tful Yoim. So if you had a Torah Kohen or a Torah person that wanted to get involved with the Paraduma, first they would make him touch a sheretz. They would purposely be matama him. Then let him go to the mikvah so that we can demonstrate to the world, Tzedaikim, you are wrong. A Tvul Yoim could be Oishik. And if you remember, because of that, because they showed such a great leniency, in the process of the Paraduma, they actually were matama the guy before he could do it. Because of that, they went crazy with tremendous amount of chumras into Tahira to offset that, so people should take a relaxed approach to Paraduma. You have to be very careful with Paraduma. There was just one clue that they did, and because of that, they made many chumras so that people shouldn't take Paraduma lightly.
How is the joy with what was David telling us the other day to David Lipton that illness and illness and stuff is not politically motivated?
This is not political. So let me ask you a question. I'm happy you brought that up because I'm going to tell you something that the Chordim speak about. Uvos gate on to accommodate them. It's not a problem for us that a person shouldn't be at full yom. Yeah, it's a big deal. So it'll be Torah. So what's the big deal? The teretz is that not only are the chumras and the chiyuvim of the Torah important, the kulas are just as important. So therefore, it's important for Chazal to firzich with the kulas as well. So that's not political. It's halacha. You have to demonstrate halacha.
You have to demonstrate, so Omission wants to demonstrate the halacha. But here we see, but we see that the Chazal and the Beit Hamikdash went over and above with kulas, and they practiced their Yiddishkeit. Their Yiddishkeit was influenced by an outside source, right?
Who Yiddishkeit?
The Yiddishkeit itself, because made them because of what the Tzlukim did.
No, they wanted to show the halacha. They wanted to make sure the halacha was clear. Moshe did the same. He didn't care about politics. He wanted to pass like the halacha. So either way, they're following the halacha and they're demonstrating that this is the halacha. And especially if there's a question, they're even sure to make sure everyone knows what the halacha is. Let's go all right. They asked a question of Reb Sheshes. Oral ma'u b'maiser. Is an oral allowed to eat maiser? So we've already discussed whether or not an oral kashbitz from the Meipara. We discussed if an oral is allowed from the Korban Pesach. We already discussed an oral kani truma. Can an oral eat maiser? Kihechi. So what is the shaila? Kihechi di olav Pesach mi maiser li'ninaninus. We know that you're not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach when you're not. How do we know? Because we learned it from Meiser, and by beer Meisers, it says chalti ba'oini mimenu. So that's how you know you're not allowed to eat Meiser when you're not. So the same way, there's a sharing of information between Meiser and Pesach, and we say just like you're not allowed to eat Meiser when you're not, so too you can't eat Korban Pesach when you're not. Maybe we could go the other way. Maybe Pesach can teach some information to Meiser. Yelaf nami Meiser Pesach, leading their elis. Which means that just like by Pesach, we know an oral can't eat because it's a mafurish pasuk. Maybe we should learn from Pesach to Meiser, just like we learned earlier from Meiser to Pesach, that oral may not eat Meiser. That's one side of the shaila. Aydilma chomer mikal yalaf. Pesach is kosher. It's a lot more chomer than Meiser. So we would say that if by Meiser an onion can't eat it, it's logical that for sure by a Korban Pesach, which is more chomer, it's kosher. An onion shouldn't be able to eat the Korban Pesach. But kal mechomer lo yalaf. Just because we know that an oral can't eat from the Korban Pesach, why should I say that Meiser, which is much more kuladik, why would I say that the oral won't be able to eat Meiser? So that is the shayla. So Amar Lahu, so Reb Sheshes responded. To Nisua, we actually have a Mishnah that clarifies this shayla. And it says in the Mishnah as follows: Hatruma babikurim chayavan alayah misa. If someone eats truma and bikurim when he's not supposed to, he's chayav misa. Who are we talking about? Rashi says tamei ha'oichla. If one is tamei and one eats truma, So like a kohen who's tummy eats truma, he's going to be mechuyev misa with the shemaim. The chesiv says in the pasuk, umesu boy, one will die because of the truma. Ki yechalaluhu, because they're being mechalal the truma. Ubikurim katruma, and bikurim we learn is just like truma. The amar mar trumas yotcha elu habikurim. The pasuk refers to bikurim as trumas yotcha. So we know if one eats truma or one eats bikurim, when they're tamei, they're going to be mechayiv misa b'dishmayim. V'chaymish Rashi says if a zor, a Yisrael or a Levi eats truma and he's unauthorized, he has to pay back the keren and he has to add a 20% premium. V'asur and lazar, truma and bikurim may not be eaten by zor. Well, the question is, isn't that already included in what chaymish is? Right? But by definition, you're only paying a chaymish if it's also lazar. So I believe Tosfos asked that kasha. Tosfos, I believe, asked that kasha. The second wide line, keeping the Tana de Chayav and Chaimish, since the Bryce already says that the Chaimish, well, obviously the Zor is not allowed to eat it. So this Tosfos' answer takes us into a Velt Sugya. Zog Tosfos, Chatzi Shir is also in a Torah, which means even though you might not pay a Chaimish, if you ate a very small amount of Truma, but there's a rule, at least according to one Shita, that Chatzi Shir is also in a Torah. So there's an Isser for a Zor to eat even a Chatzi Shir, even in a case where there would not be a Chaimish involved. Which means you're not allowed to say, okay, the Shir of Achilas Chametz on Pesach is a Kazayas. I'll eat a half a Kazayas. Not allowed to do that. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says weiter. The Hein Dichse Kohen, they belong to the Kohen, and Rashi's nafkamina is he could be Mekadosh and Nisha with it. The Oilen Becherumeya. It's not batal b'roi like a regular isser. Rather, you need to have 100 times connected it in order to be batal. And uta inas rechitzas yadayim b'arav shemesh. There's a halacha of rechitzas yadayim. The Chazal were machmer that yadayim are considered shmiyos, and since truma can become shlishi l'tuma, if your hands are sheni l'tuma and you touch the truma, you're going to make a tummy. Therefore, you have to wash your hands before you could touch truma. And the Harav Shemesh, and if you were a Tlul Yoim, if you touched the sheretz and you were really Tameh, and then you went to the mikveh, you wouldn't be able to touch Truma until the evening. Harei Elu with Truma Bikurim, the above list are chumrish that exist to Truma and Bikurim, Masha Enkein b'Meiser, but not by Meiser. So we had a question here, is an oral allowed to eat Meiser? If an oral is not allowed to eat Meiser, then it seems that the oral can eat truma and the oral can eat bikurim, so they're all the same. But if you hold that an oral may eat meiser, why didn't the Brisa or the Mishnah list arelus as well as a difference between truma and meiser? From Isa, if you hold that an oral is not, if you hold that an oral is allowed to eat meiser, nisnei oral aser behen, an oral may not eat truma, nor may an oral eat bikurim, ma'ashen can be meiser, but he would be allowed to eat meiser. So that's a very pashut gasha. The fact that the Mishnah omits a clear example of where truma is more chomer than meiser, that an oral can't eat truma, yet an oral can eat meiser, it's a raya, in fact, that an oral may not eat meiser. It's not a raya. Whenever a Tana gives a list, it has to be a comprehensive list. No, it's normal that the Tana will not give you a complete list. But if the Tana doesn't give you a complete list, he'll never just omit one item. He'll always omit at least two items. Because otherwise you'll ask, why bedafka this item didn't you say, didn't you list? But if there's another item there, so then it's logical to argue that the Tana wasn't giving you a complete list. This is one of the cases that the Tana could have said as another example between Truma and Meiser, that an Oral may not eat Truma, but yet an Oral may eat Meiser. But the Tana left that out, and the Tana also left out another case. Umay Shire to High Shire. So what are the cases the Tana leave out? So for Shire, it didn't leave over something that's relevant to the difference between Truma, Bikurim, and Meiser. But in the Sefer of the Brisa, of the Mishnah, there's another subject discussed, and in that subject, the Tana also left something off the list. So this is a Chiddush to Tana V'Shire, because since on a different list, the Tana left out something there, so on our list, we'll leave out something here. But that's what the Gemara is saying. The Katani Sefer, Yesh b'Meiser, Ubikurim, don't worry, we're going to have another pshat that's going to show you that there's another thing left out of this case. But for now, we're talking about the Tana V'Shire in the second case of the Mishnah. Yesh b'Maiser u'b'Bikurim, Masha ain't came b'Truma. There are chumras by Maiser and Bikurim that Truma doesn't have. And what are those? Maiser v'Bikurim to unin havos makim. Maiser and Bikurim you have to bring up to the base of Mikdash. By Bir Maiser, you say Bi'arti HaKodesh Rabbi, there's a whole stickle that you say there. I think it's every third year. And by Bikurim, every year you bring that up to the base of Mikdash. Truma, wherever you are, you give it to the Kohen. You don't have to bring it anywhere. Uta unin vidui. There's something called vidu maisris. There's something called vidui bikurim, which you don't have for truma. And even though you do mention the truma, that's only referring to the trumas meiser. The osir loinen. And an onion may not eat meiser, nor may an onion eat bikurim. Yet an onion is allowed to eat truma. Rab Shimon matir. Rab Shimon holds that it's mutter. This is a little bit of a question, what this means for Rab Shimon matir. Rab Shimon says, bikurim l'onion, right? Because we learned earlier that an onion may not eat meiser, right? That's how you know by a korban pesach you can. But at least by bikurim, Rab Shimon holds an onion is allowed to eat it. The chayovim bebir, and there's also a chiyav to be bebayir. Meisers have to be totally destroyed. I think 3 years later, or every third year there's a beer meisers, and the same with bikurim. Truma, the kohen can keep it as long as he wants. Rab Shimon poiter. Rab Shimon holds that there is no chiyav to be mevayer once again bibikurim. Yet there is another difference that exists by Ma'aser and Bikurim that doesn't exist by Truma, that the Mishnah omitted. Vilu aser levarim hen betuma. The halach is if you have Truma Tamei, a kohen has Truma Tamei, he can't eat it. He still can benefit from it. He can use it to light the Lag Boimer fire. He's allowed to use it to cook his food. He's allowed to have a no from it. However, Meiser and Bikurim, you're not allowed to burn. You're not allowed to burn. You're not allowed to even benefit from it. So the ilu aser levarim and betuma, the difference that Bikurim and Meiser, you're not allowed to burn when they're tamei to benefit from them. Yet truma you are, it did not list. And the oichlon betumas atzman loika. The halacha is if you eat truma and you're not tamei, but the truma is tamei, there's only an iser lav. But if you eat meiser and the meiser is tamei, then you get malchus. So that's another chumrah that exists by meiser and bikurim over truma, that you get malchus if you eat it when it is tamei. So you see in the Sefer of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah was giving us a list, the Mishnah omitted 2 items from that list. Therefore, in the Reisha, when we're talking about the chumash of truma over meiser, we're allowed to omit this halacha that by meiser and oral is allowed to eat. So the end of the day, what we're holding is we have a shaila whether or not one may eat meiser if one is an oral, and we have not yet come up with a conclusive answer. Zokti Gemara Vayter. Vasurin la'oin. Let me just look at the Bach to see what the Aleph says here. Amar Mar, Vasurin la'oin. So we're going back on the brisa that we just quoted, that meiser and bikurim is also to an oin. For Rab Shimon matir. Rab Shimon is matir and oinen to eat bikurim. Minalahu. Or no, Rab Shimon's matir even meiser to eat for an oinen. I'm sorry. Minalahu. How does Rab Shimon know that? Dr. Gemara, the Chesivit says in the pasuk, Leisuchal ulechal b'sharecha meiser degancha b'siroshcha b'yitzarecha u'b'chorish b'karcha u'trumas yotcha v'amar mar trumas yotcha elu bikurim. In this long list of things that leisuchal ulechal b'sharecha, it lists off trumas yotcha, and the Rabbanan tell us that what is trumas yotcha referred to in the pasuk is referring to bikurim. And because of that, the ishkash bikurim and meiser. There's a hekesh between bikurim and meiser because in this one pasuk, the pasuk is addressing bikurim and the pasuk is addressing meiser. And we learn from there, ma meiser asher loinen, af bikurim asher loinen. So that's how we know that both bikurim and meiser is asher for an oinen to eat. So what's Rab Shimon Svar who holds that by bikurim an oinen may eat it? So it seems like everybody agrees for sure by meiser and oinen may not eat it. The question is by bikurim. So Zakmar Rab Shimon truma karinu rechmana. Don't make a hekesh between trumas yotcha, which you're talking about bikurim and meiser. No, scratch that. It says trumas yotcha. Look at the word itself. If it's calling Bikurim Trumas Yotcha, clearly the Torah is trying to tell us that there's a similarity between Truma and Bikurim. We have Shimon Truma Karinu Rachman. Ma Truma Muteris La'inin. Just like Truma we know is mutter for an Einin to eat, Af Bikurim Mutter La'inin B'chayav Mevir. I'm sorry, Mutter La'inin, period. So let's just review for a second. There's two ways to learn the pasuk. You can either use the pasuk as a hekesh between Meiser and Bikurim, and they will say, just like by Meiser, an onion can eat it, so to Bikurim, an onion can eat. Or say there's no hekesh. The fact that the Torah referred to Bikurim as Truma tells you that it's mutalon. That's Tamachlis. Okay, now let's get to the next line. The Chayovim Bebir. We said that there's a Chiyav of beer Meisers and there's a Chiyav of beer Bikurim. Rab Shimon Poiter, Rab Shimon said there is no Chiyav of beer Bikurim. Where does that Machlokes come from? Zaktamar from the same place as we just said a second ago. Mar Makish. The Tanakama makes a hekesh from Truma to Bikurim. I'm sorry, from Meiser to Bikurim. And therefore, just like by Meiser, we know there's beer Meisers. So too, by Bikurim, there'll be beer Bikurim. Umar loy Makish. But Rab Shimon wasn't Makish. He said that we look at Bikurim like we look at Truma, because it's called the Truma Shotcha, and there's no hekesh from Bikurim to Meiser. What about the next line of the Brisa? V'asur levayer mehen b'tumah. You're not allowed to burn them and have enough of them when they're tamei. This is referring to Bikurim and Meiser, but Truma you are allowed to. V'oichlan b'tumas atzman loika. If you eat Meiser, or if you eat Bikurim, and the Meiser is tamei, and the Bikurim is tamei, you get malchus for it. But if you eat Truma when the Truma is tamei, it's only an iser asay. Minolan, how do we know that you get a lav, you get malchus, if you eat Meiser when the Meiser is tamei, and if you eat Bikurim when the Bikurim is tamei? The Tanya we learned, in the Vidui Meisers, we say, Lebi'arti mimenu b'tamei. I did not destroy the Meiser when there's Tumah here. And we darshan, Bein Shani Tamei v'hutar. Whether or not I'm Tamei and it's tar, I didn't destroy the Meiser. Bein Shani tar v'hutamei. Or whether I was tar and it was Tamei. So right off the bat, you see that I'm not allowed to be mevayer, I'm not allowed to burn the Meiser, even if it's Tamei. The Heichi Muzar Alachi Lasser. Now, by the beer Meisers, it's just someone saying, I didn't do this. But where does it say, where is the law? Where is the actual law that says that you're not allowed to destroy the Meiser? Any idea? I don't know. Zok Gemara, Tumas Aguf, if the person himself is Tamei, the Hedjik Sivbei, Nevesh Asher Tigaboy, Utmei Ad Arab. So it says someone who's Tamei, someone who touches a shirt is Tamei until the night. And then the pasuk goes on and says, "V'lo yoichal min hakachim," you're not allowed to eat from kachim. And the Gemara dashes in this case, kachim is referring to Meiser. V'lo yoichal min hakachim kim rachatz b'sari b'mayim. So we know that if you're tamei, you're not allowed to eat the Meiser. But we want to know. So the Gemara asks, how do I know that there's a malchus for tumah by Meiser? The Gemara, you have a pasuk right here. But the problem is, the Gemara, this pasuk isn't adequate. Because the pasuk we just quoted, which was nefesh eshetiga boy, and then it says v'lo yoicham in hakachim where there's a lav, that's referring to a person that's tamei. It's not referring to the meiser that's tamei. So where do you find a lav to prohibit one from eating meiser when the meiser is tamei? Tumas atzmoi minayin, when the meiser is tamei, how do you know that one is not allowed to eat it? Hamad loymar loisucha lecho b'sharecha meiser degancha. It says you're not allowed to eat b'sharecha ma'aser degancha ulahalanu aimer. And regarding psulei mekdoshin sheniftu, the halach is if someone has a carbon, he's bringing a carbon oila, and then after he was makdish the animal, something went wrong, and the animal got a mum. So they're no longer allowed to be makdish this animal on the mizbeach. What do they do with it? They allow people to buy it and to redeem it. So let's say the sheep is worth $50. You give $50 to the Beis HaMikdash. And now you get this animal. This animal is free and clear. You can eat it. There's several restrictions on it, but generally speaking, it's treated like chulim. And the pasuk, when the pasuk describes what you're allowed to do with this animal that has a mum that you bought off a hektish, it says you shecht it, and b'sharecha teichlenu hatame ba'atar yachtov ketzviva chayil. You're allowed to eat it tamei and tar. In other words, now that you've redeemed this animal, it's no longer kachim, and therefore you're allowed to eat it even if it's tamei. Which means you can have this piece of meat with a piece of meat that's coming on the same plate. There's no problem. There's no restrictions lagabe tuma v'tahayra. So what does that teach us about meiser? Right, we're trying to find an isser to eat meiser when the meiser is tamei. So we bring a halacha that you're allowed to eat kachim, psulim, ekdoshim, sheniftu. You're allowed to eat that when it's tamei. So what's the shaykhus? The Tanna Devei Rabbi Shmuel, afilu tamei v'tar oichlin al shulchan echad v'ka'ir achas v'einim chosh. You can have a tamei and tar eating together on one plate, and there's no problem because there's absolutely no restrictions of eating this meat when it's tamei or when you're tamei, because we treat it like regular food. The ka'amar rachmana, hahud amrilach hasam b'sharecha teichlenu, hacha loy teichel. The pasuk is telling you that we said by psulim ekavim sheniftu b'sharecha teichlenu hatamei v'atar yachtov. That's what it's talking about when the pasuk says by ma'aser l'sucha lechel b'sharecha. So by ma'aser it says l'sucha lechel b'sharecha. Don't eat b'sharecha. What does it mean b'sharecha means? Don't eat in your house. What's the relevance of the word sharecha? The Torah says the pasuk is saying, you know where else I use the word sharecha? I use sharecha to tell you that psulim ekavim sheniftu you're allowed to eat even though it's tamei. That b'sharecha, the ability to eat the meat when it's tamei. Don't do that with ma'aser. L'sucha lechel b'sharecha ma'aser degancha. The tamei basar that I allowed you to eat b'sharecha, that I'm not allowing you to do by ma'aser. So you have over here a law that says that if one eats ma'aser, when the ma'aser is tamei, one gets malchus. That I told you b'sharecha, that you're allowed to eat tzulam and toshim sheniftu with no restriction of tumah. Techlenu hacha by ma'aser loy soichel. That's pet l'shucha lechel b'sharecha. So now we have a support that says that you get malchus if you eat ma'aser when you're tamei, and we have a limit for ma'aser to bikurim to tell us that the same thing applies to bikurim. But by truma we don't have such an isser at all. So how do we know? How do we know that by if you eat truma when you're tamei, how do you know there's even an isser lav? So Rashi tells us right on the second line of Rashi. Where do you see anything about truma? It says over there. It says in the pasuk. I'm sorry. It's going to be brought down later. We'll see from the pasuk later how you know that there's an isser asay. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Masha'enkim b'truma. By truma, we say that you don't get malchus if you eat it when the truma is tamei. We know, and how do we know this? Amar bavo, Amar b'yochanim. The Amar the pasuk says, "Lo bi'arti mimenu b'tamei," which is referring to meiser. By the Ravida Meiser, I said, "Lo bi'arti mimenu." It's only the meiser that I didn't destroy when I was tamei. Mimenu i'atamavir. It's only meiser that you're not allowed to destroy when it's tamei, even if it's tamei. Abel atamavir shemen shel truma shenitma. So we're not going back to the isser say of eating truma when it's tamei. We're talking about now whether or not you're allowed to burn truma that's tamei and benefit from it. According to a truma that's tamei, he's allowed to burn it and benefit from it. He's allowed to use it as fuel, but you're not allowed to use meiser that tamei as fuel. How do we know that? Because by meiser it says like bi'arti mimenu v'tamei. I didn't destroy it when it was tamei. Clearly, you're not allowed to. But it says mimenu. Only meiser is where there's a problem of burning it when it's tamei. Mimenu i'atamavir. Avol atamavir shemen shel truma shenitma, that you're allowed to burn. So that's how we know you're allowed to burn truma that's tamei. It's important for us to remember that the author of this limud that we just said was Mavo Amar b'yochanim. The reason why it's important to remember this is tomorrow we're going to learn that it says in mimenu many times l'gabe meiser, and the Gemara is going to want to know what each mimenu teaches us, and we're going to run out of mimenus. And because of that, the Gemara is going to ask, what are we going to do with the limud of Mavo Amar b'yochanim? So we should just remember that Mavo Amar b'yochanim used one word mimenu to teach us that you're allowed to burn truma when it's tamei. How do you know that's the dik you should make? Mimenu just says it applies to meiser and not to something else. Why is it something else that you're talking about? Truma, maybe truma you're allowed to, maybe also truma you're not allowed to burn when it's tamei. Maybe what you're allowed to burn when it's tamei is kachim. I guess tefasta meruba loy tefasta. You're saying mimenu only for this and not anything else. So that's the Gemara's going to answer. Chamti's asking why can't mimenu means this and nothing else, right? So for some reason it's a very good kasha. Kasha mimenu means from this and nothing else. But for some reason the Gemara seems to say that one miyut per customer. Maybe tefasta meruba loy tefasta. So you can't be mimayit more than one thing. But the Svar should tell me that if the meat is because this only, not anything else, and not anything else refers to anything else. I hear your kasha. I think it's a Gishmaka kasha. I don't have an answer. So maybe you don't learn that you're allowed to burn truma to meya. Maybe you're allowed to burn kodesh to meya. So the Gemara comes with Mati's Taina. Lav kal v'chaymer. Isn't it a kal v'chaymer? Uma meiser a kal. Madach by meiser, which is kal. Umra Torah lebi'artim menu b'tamei. The Torah tells us that you're not allowed to burn when it's tamei. Kodesh chamer. Kodesh is much more chamer than meiser. Like Kosher, surely you shouldn't be able to burn it with tummy. If you have that kal v'chaymer, apply that same kal v'chaymer to truma. Iachi truma nami kal v'chaymer. Madach meiser a kal you can't burn. Kosher and truma you shouldn't be able to burn. But mimenu is telling us that there is something that you're allowed to burn. So in fact, why are you applying the mimenu to truma? Maybe apply the mimenu to kachim. And once again, Chaim Tzvi asks, why can't you apply the mimenu to both? But you see, the Gemara is not willing to do that. So the Gemara mistabra kodesh loy mimeitna. It's mistabra to say that we're not being mimayit kodesh. In other words, we're not trying to tell you that by kodesh you are allowed to burn it when it's tamei. Shekain penakachs. What does this mean? It's referring to 6 different chumras that kodesh have. A, the Isser Pigal applies to Kachim. B, the Isser Noiser applies to Kachim. C, it's a carbon. Me'ila, there's a Chiyav or Me'ila, if someone has a Noah from Kachim. Kares, one who eats Kachim when the person himself is Tameh, gets Kares. The Aser La'ayning, and an Ayning may not eat Kachim. These are all chumras that Truma doesn't have, so therefore we'll also say that you cannot burn Kachim when it's Tameh and have enough from it. Just more other of it. Truma has chumras. Shekain machbaz. What are machbaz? Machbaz is going to come back. Also tomorrow we're going to use machbaz again. Misa, there's a chiyav of misa b'dei shemayim. If someone eats it when they're tamei. No, I'm sorry. Machbaz is like chelas b'tumas aguf. That's right. If you eat it b'tumas aguf, the chaimish, the zoro eats it has to add a chaimish. The ein la pikin. Unlike kachim, which you could redeem, you could never redeem truma. And basur lazarim, and zarim are not allowed to eat truma. Mashenkin zarim are allowed to eat kachim. Zok the Gemara hanech nefishin. Pankras is 6 things. Machmas is 4. 6 trumps 4. So that's why if we were going to say that there's a heter to burn something and have enough from it, we'll apply that heter to truma and not to kachim. The boy say karis adifa, or karis is more chomer than misa b'dei shemayim. So right away we have a more kasha. If we're trying to show that kachim is more chomer, karis is on the list. On the side that we want to say truma is more chomer, we said truma is chayiv misa b'dei shemayim. How does the Gemara ever have a havamina that misa b'dei shemayim is a chomer over karis? Right? If you look back over here, in Panchas, one of them was karis. There's a chi of karis if you eat it with his tummy. The Gemara said, no, truma is more chomer because truma is misa b'dei shemayim. That's not a chomer, that's a kula. Is that a good kasha? I think it's a good kasha. So Tosha says, Frank the Gemara. Zok Tosha, the third from the line from Moshe. Came Machmas. Him Timer. Frank Tosha. The Meikara Alima Lakaris. When the Gemara is listing off the chumash of kachim, it says karis is more chomer. But then when the Gemara is trying to highlight the chumash of truma, Alima Lemisa, which one is it? The Yeshloim is Tosha. The Hashta Lav Me Oichel B'Tumas Aguf Barach. The Chiv Karish by Kachim comes if you eat the Kachim when you're Tameh. Surely, if you eat the Kachim when you're Tameh, you get Karish, and if you eat the Truma when you're Tameh, you get Misa B'dei Shemayim. Hands down, the Karish is more Chum. So what are we referring to when we say there's a Chum by Truma that is Misa B'dei Shemayim? Zaktaizis Ela Mizar HaOichla Ma'Sheikim B'Kodesh. We're talking about if a Zar eats Kodesh versus a guy eating a Zar eating Truma, the B'Kodesh Yeshemut L'Zarim. By Kodesh, there's certain karbanis that a Zar is allowed to eat. Kagan Shlamim. A Yisrael is allowed to eat from a carbon Shlamim. And even if there's kachim that could only be eaten by the Kahanim, if a Yisrael ate the Kohen's part, Leka Misa Bizar El Asara, it's only allowed. Vafilu Kodesh, the Bar Milah, Leka Misa L'Rabanan, Dam Hejba Milah Basar. So that's where you see there's, in a certain respect, there are certain achilas trumas which give you misa, and those achilas of kachim wouldn't give you misa. So that's what it was talking about. It's not talking about the general rule that truma has misa and kachim has kares that makes misa, that makes truma more chomer. No, It's the cases where there would only be a lav by kochim or no lav at all, whereby truma there would be a chibis. Correct. We said that if you eat meiser when the meiser is tamei, you get malchus. But if you eat truma when the truma is tamei, it's only an Israel say. I shake it with truma. You don't get malchus if you eat truma when the truma is tamei. But you're not supposed to do it. I mean, Nolan, how do you know that you're not supposed to eat truma when the truma is tamei? It says once again by the psulei makdashim. You're allowed to eat the psulei makdashim anywhere you want. There's a diak. Davke this psulei makdashim sheniftu. Are you allowed to eat truma? Are you allowed to eat tamei and tahar together? But by something else, referring to truma, there you wouldn't be allowed to eat it when it's tamei. But there's no lab. It's a lav haba mechalasei. We're being medai. Davke by psulei makdashim sheniftu. You're allowed to eat tamei and tahar together. Masha'en kain by truma you're not. So that's a lav haba mechalasei, and therefore it's only an isra say. So now the Gemara has, we'll stop here. But this is where the Gemara is going to say, even in the first case, we can say Tana B'Shire. It's one line. Amar Bachi Mireisha Nami Shamas Mina, the Tana B'Shire. You don't have to go to the second case, in the second list to find a Tana B'Shire. Even in the first list, something got missed out. It could have said that Truma and Bikurim are every single year. The Ein Lahem pigeon, and you could never be paid to them. Meiser is not Nageya every year. It's only Nageya by the 6th year and the 5th year. We're talking about the Meiser Ani. So therefore, these are additional differences that the Mishnah could have listed off that exist between Truma, Bikurim, and Meiser, and it didn't. So therefore, it could also miss out the fact that an Oro is not allowed to eat Truma, while an Oro is allowed to eat Meiser. Shema Mina. Okay, we'll stop here. Perfect. Go ahead.
Save the day.